This episode of Another Happy Pod is going to contain spoilers. If you've not experienced the content yourself, please go ahead and do so before coming back and listening to the boys ramble on about it. Thank you very much.
Welcome to another Happy Pod brought to you by the Pint Size Network. My name is Nathan Bauer and I'm joined by this...
That's me, I guess. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks for that heartwarming intro. You mean so much to me.
You're welcome. Do you want to say your name?
Yeah, I'm Lawrence, otherwise known as that c***.
There you go. Perfect. How are you doing today, Lawrence?
I'm very well. We're recording the pod later than we normally do. We normally record about 10 a.m. Today it is fast approaching 9 p.m. So I'm a little bit tired. I did just eat a big dinner, and I'm feeling a little bit sluggish, Nathan. How about you?
What did you have for dinner?
I had, it was chorizo and chicken pasta, but the chicken and the chorizo was inside the pasta.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah. It was very flavoursome, and I cooked it myself. Sorry? Tortellini, I've been informed.
Who's that there in the background?
I'm not disclosing her name. She didn't consent. She didn't sign a form.
Is that zucchini?
Yeah, it's zucchini. That's our loyal editor. Nathan, what are we doing? What are we doing today?
Well, today we're doing a Spidey special. We're going to be talking about every single Spider-Man movie for some fucking reason, because on a podcast where we usually go for about 45 minutes, we thought, why not squeeze 9 movies into that length? So here we are.
Is there 9 of them?
There's
Jesus.
9 of them.
Is there really?
There's 9. Yeah, there's 3. There's 3 Raimis, 2 Amazing, so that's 5, and then there's 2. Oh wait, no. So there's 8.
There's 2 MCUs.
There's 2 MCUs.
No, but then there's Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah. So
would you count Civil
8.
War?
Well, if you count Civil War, then I guess you'd have to count Infinity War and Endgame as well, and that would take it up to like
True.
11, 12. I don't know. I'm bad at maths, but there's a number
too
of
many
them.
Spider-Men.
There's a lot of them, is what I'm saying.
There's far too many. How do you feel about Spider-Man? For me, he's my favorite superhero. So.
Yeah, I really like Spider-Man. He's always been a favorite, and I think for a lot of people, he's like sort of a gateway into like the that fantastical Marvel and comic book world. He definitely was for me. I mean, my introduction was the animated series in the 90s on Fox Kids, I believe it was. Yeah, so I watched that like pretty much every Saturday morning when that was on. And then before the movie came out, the first Raimi movie, that's when I got into comic books as well and just started reading the Ultimate Spider-Man comic books and just loved them.
Check you out.
I know. What about you?
When I was younger, my first kind of introduction to Spider-Man was the Spider-Man 2, the Raimi film.
Spider-Man 2?
I must have watched that. Yeah, I must have. Well, I'm a younger boy than you. You're an elderly man.
All right. For that.
I wasn't around when this Fox Kids business was going on. Yeah, Spider-Man 2. I probably watched it like every day when I was quite young. And yeah, just kind of grew up like every kid does, like wanting to be the coolest superhero. And for me at the time, that was Spider-Man. So yeah, it kind of stuck with me since then. That trilogy's held up in terms of like, I think they're good movies, which we'll get into. And it's just kind of stuck around as a character that I've always had quite a, passionate feeling towards.
There's definitely a reason why Spider-Man is often considered the most popular comic book character and superhero. Some people would argue Batman, some people would argue Superman, but I think for a lot of people, the majority of the time, if you ask someone who's their favorite superhero, they're gonna mention Spider-Man. I don't know if that is the case for me. I definitely love Spider-Man. He is an amazing superhero, and I definitely love parts of his story. But yeah, I don't really know where I stand on that. But he is yours, is that right? He is your favorite.
He is definitively my favorite. Yeah, followed closely by Batman.
I feel like Batman's just such a like edgy white boy answer.
You're not wrong, but I like Batman. and you just have to take my word for it that I simultaneously love Batman, but also don't think Joker is 2019's masterpiece movie. So I hit the sweet spot of actually liking Batman, if that makes sense.
All right, fine. We'll talk about that another time.
Yeah.
All right. So then, you're sort of leading and bringing some structure to all this. So you start us off. Where are we going?
Okay. So obviously we've spoken about the Spider-Man movies. Like you say, we've got the trilogy, then the two Amazings, then all the MCU Spider-Mans, and then Spider-Mans, and then also
Spider-People.
the Into the Spider-Verse. Spider-People, we'll go with that. Spider-People sounds nice. Inclusive as well.
Yeah.
Lovely. Basically, first question kind of straight in there. What's your favourite?
Out of all of them?
Out of all of them.
Okay. It's quite a difficult question. I think for me, it comes down to two of them. And I would go back and forth. And I think I want to say Into the Spider-Verse. And I think that would be the answer for a lot of people as well.
That would.
Yeah, because I'm sure we'll get into it, but it's a great movie. But I would also want to say as well, and I don't think as many people would say this, but Far From Home.
Okay. Yeah. No. We have a similar opinion on Far From Home. I think when we first saw it, we texted each other and we said it's pretty up there because it was receiving like it was a bit of a, you know, a term that we quite like here, a bit of a Marmite movie, where people either seem to really like it and were like massively on board with it, or they came out being like, "Oh, I knew Mysterio was going to be bad the whole time. I didn't like the film." Like,
What would you expect?
Not
All right,
enjoying it too much.
I think most people like Far From Home. I feel like you see more of a negative reaction online to that movie from. Oh, I want to be careful here. From certain areas of the Spider-Man fandom who will possibly, let's say, worship a certain director and will worship a certain trilogy that director made in the early 2000s. I'm not saying which trilogy, but I'm just saying there's certain people like that out there.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's they're good movies, and Spider-Man fans are up there with Star Wars in terms of being some of the worst fucking assholes on the internet.
I think sometimes they can be worse than. I mean, Star Wars fans are the absolute worst, but there are
the epitome of evil.
No one hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans, but I think that's also true for Spider-Man fans as well. No one hates Spider-Man more than Spidey fans. It's just one of those things, really.
It's true. I personally would say definitively my favorite. Like you say, I think it doesn't come down to two for me, but it is very close. I enjoy all of them. There's not a single Spider-Man movie, including Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, that I don't like. I love all of them. Yeah. I could sit there and rewatch all of them many times and have a great amount of enjoyment. But for me, it's going to sound boring now because you've said it as well, but it is Into the Spider-Verse for reasons we'll touch on when we go a little bit more in detail later on.
Well, it's not boring. Obviously, there's a reason why that movie sticks out to a lot of people, and I don't want to get into it now because we will get into it. But yeah, there's definitely a reason why people gravitate to that movie.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, it's aimed at kids, so it's lighthearted, it's fun. But also, like, there's stuff that kids won't appreciate in there, like the messages about kind of believing in yourself, not just in a hero capacity, but in just being a genuinely okay human being. Yeah, there's lovely stuff in there. But I got some takes. I asked some friends of mine what they thought. A few of them got back to me. So the first take we've got from my friend Alex Liddard, who has said that Into the Spider-Verse is the best movie. It was subsequently shot down by saying it's not a hot take because that's a general opinion. So nice one, Liddard. Will has said, I like the one with Peter Parker in it. So that's definitively very, very helpful. So thank you to Will.
That is just classic Will. That is.
It's classic Will. And Dylan has come in and said Spider-Man 3 purely for the nostalgic value and the quality of the memes.
Yeah, that's fair. Spider-Man 3 has produced some pretty incredible memes, so yeah, I can't argue with that.
Memes that have been recognized by Sony as well. They included the dancing segment in in a scene in Into the Spider-Verse. So yeah, it's worked out better for them, I'd say.
And yeah, the video game as well.
Yeah. So look, out of all of them, we've spoken about what our favorite movies are. Who do you think is not the best Spider-Man? Who do you think is your Spider-Man?
I would say, I would say Tom Holland. Yeah.
Okay. Is that because he's in the MCU or?
No. I just think that particular adaptation or characterization or whatever you want to call it of both Peter Parker and Spider-Man, I think more so than the other two, and I'm only talking about live action here, more so than the other two, I think he's the one who gets it down. From the version that I've read, and the version that I watched in the animated show and the comic books and everything like that, he is the one who more closely resembles and brings that character to life for me.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think my Spider-Man is, as it is for a lot of people, especially my age. Again, sorry, Nathan, you are an old man. My Spider-Man is always going to be Tobey Maguire, but that is definitely not to say that I think he has the best movies or characterization, and that's something I actually kind of wanted to touch on. Obviously, there is naturally a big disconnect between the characters of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, because Spider-Man is essentially Peter Parker's escape from being Peter Parker. Mm-hmm. So who's your best Peter?
Also Tom.
Yeah? Do you think he just nails it, like, with both?
He does. He's I feel like out of the three of them, Tom Holland has really sort of nailed the struggle of Peter Parker, and I'm not talking about like a struggle in a sense like, you know, he's always poor or things are always going wrong for him. I mean the struggle in the sense of trying to balance both being Peter and Spider-Man, because he wants to be Spider-Man. That's been his dream. He's a kid growing up in a world where the Avengers are a thing. Okay, of course you would want to put on a suit and join that, and he's basically had his dream handed to him on a silver platter. But at the same time, he still wants to be Peter Parker. He still wants to have, you know, the high school experiences. He wants to go to parties and kiss girls and hang out with Mary Jane and everything like that. And the struggle of trying to balance the two, he's the one who just kind of nails that, I think. I don't think that was ever really a problem for Andrew Garfield.
No, it definitely wasn't. There's a few scenes where like he's kind of having to balance stuff and Gwen gets like a little bit cross. It's never a struggle. I think it's interesting you say that, because I actually think the film that handles that the best is Spider-Man 2 from the trilogy. You know, where... Go on.
I don't think it does. I literally just watched that movie, and I think it handles. It doesn't necessarily handle. Peter doesn't necessarily handle that struggle. It's more like he's forced to. Like, he doesn't really get a choice in the matter. It's the choice is kind of made for him because he loses his powers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense, but it's also he loses his powers because of the internal conflict he's already experiencing. But anyway, actually, now that we're on Spider-Man trilogy, let's start going a little bit more in depth about these versions of the characters. So, overall, what do you think about the Tobey?
Let me just ask. You said that Tobey was your Spider-Man. Why is that?
So for me, well, firstly, he has the benefit of being the first iteration I saw of the character ever. So naturally, that will always kind of hold a bit of weight for me. The main reason, I think, is because the films are quite emotionally grounded. Like, I'd say with the Raimi films, they're cheesy and they're camp and they're silly, but they're very much so stories about real people. And that's played on enormously. Like, I think in Spider-Man 2, there's like less than like half an hour screen time of Spider-Man. It's mostly a movie about Peter Parker, and I really really enjoy the emotionally grounded stories. Like I say, I think that he did a sensational job playing Peter Parker. Do I think that makes him perfect? Probably not, because of the fact that his Spider-Man sometimes suffers because you can't really go from being that version of Peter Parker to the most comic accurate Spider-Man. But I still really enjoy it. Like I say, those movies are timeless kind of classics for me, which I really enjoy. So that's probably why he holds that weight for me.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, there's definitely an element of nostalgia there. I think that's a big thing for a lot of people when it comes to the Raimi trilogy. And I'm not saying that to disparage it or discredit it at all. I think that's one of the things that works well for the trilogy in a good way. I just think that between Peter Parker and Spider-Man, I just think between the Tobey Peter and Spider-Man, I should say, there's just a really big disconnect between the two. To me, they don't feel like the same person. I guess for a lot of people, that's part of it as well, because you do want some difference there. But I don't know, there's just times where when he's got the mask on, it does not feel like the same person is underneath it. Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, completely. I get that entirely. I think that the version of it the only thing is voice. Like, even down to like there's little things where like I'm 90% certain they put Tobey Maguire in like a bit of a muscle suit, because when he's walking around and he's just like in his Peter Parker clothes, he's like a little scrawny kid, and then when he's Spider-Man, he's a unit.
Yeah, he looks so skinny when he's Peter.
Yeah, I don't know if that maybe he's just doing a very good physical job at playing Peter Parker, but he transforms into a unit when he's really actually does. Peter.
And maybe that's because this suit is so skin tight and everything like that as well.
Yeah.
What do you think of the suit?
Look, I'm going to be absolutely honest. I fucking hate it. It's very bad for me. Like,
why do you hate it?
It's a product of its time. I understand that, and it's very nostalgic, but I can't keep using that as an excuse. I just think it's a bad design, and his face is so like. Yeah, I know the CGI wasn't the best back then, although it does have some of the most like cinematically pleasing swinging sequences of any Spider-Man movie.
It does, yeah.
It's. Like, he couldn't have had the expressive eyes that they've got in the MCU Spider-Man now. Like, it just would have looked out of place in that kind of movie. But I think it does suffer because because he doesn't really joke around as much as the other Spider-Men as well. It's really difficult to tell the tone sometimes. And I just feel like the mask is so like unexpressive that it lets it down massively for me. Also, it's one of them. It's one of them that looks very good when it's all close up and you can like see like the stitching and how like intricately woven it is, because the design is great. It just doesn't look good on the film, if that makes sense. Yeah, like for me personally, it just doesn't translate well onto screen at all. Like, it's just, I don't know, it doesn't look good practically. Like, I feel like there's been some really hit or miss Spider-Man like suits, and this is one for me that just when I see it, like I tell you what, for the perfect example, when you could play as in different suits in the Spider-Man PS4 game. I tried that one on once, and then I just went, nah, this looks disgusting. I don't like it.
Yeah.
And I took it off. So that's, I just I don't enjoy the suit. I find it very unexpressive and a bit boring.
That's fair. I definitely get what you mean. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of it. I wouldn't say it's my least favorite live action suit. I'd say that's the first Amazing Spider-Man one.
The basketball suit.
Yeah, the basketball suit, yeah. But yeah, I tell you what I don't like. I don't like the spider on the back of it. There's just something about that spider design where it's just like really big and weird. I'm not a fan.
Yeah, it's just a bit, it's very loud, isn't it? It's just there.
It really is, yeah. And also there's just no explanation as how he made or got the suit. Like, it just appears. There's like, that is like $1 million like high quality weaving with metal webbing all over it, and suddenly this broke high school kid just has that costume.
That's the thing. Say what you want about the first Amazing Spider-Man suit, the basketball suit. Whilst I do think it's awful, it at least looks intentionally awful. Like I've seen like a behind the scenes thing where the costume designers were saying, you know, this isn't the most pristine Spider-Man suit, and that's because we don't want it to be. We need to believe that like a random kid has just made this out of shit he found.
See, I still, like, I've seen that suit, and obviously I've seen the suit. I still don't believe, like, a high school kid could make that, though. It still seems, like, too high quality, and it's not, because it looks awful, but it still seems like it's too professionally made. Like, the only one I believe a high school kid could actually make is, obviously, the sweatsuit version from Homecoming.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, that suit intentionally looks like dog shit.
Yeah, it does. But yeah, so back to the Raimis, the trilogy as a whole.
Look, for me, by way of filmmaking, like I've said, these stories feel deep. They feel very personal. One thing I really, really enjoy about them, and I'm not sure if, like, I thought about this just before we recorded, so it may not be 100% based on facts, but at least it's how I remember it. Every villain reinforces, like, the overall theme of the story. Like, I find something that lacks in, like, some of the MCU movies. Not the Spider-Man one specifically, but, like, the villains are just, replaceable, easily forgotten. Blue light in the sky, like blue beam in the air kind of thing. They're just a little bit boring and bland. The villains in the Raimi trilogy, they all teach Spider-Man a very important lesson.
Okay.
So, for example, the one, like Green Goblin, teaches Peter Parker to not trust so easily, stop being so naive. Like, just because you know someone doesn't mean they don't want to fucking kill you for their own gain. And that makes him into a more responsible hero. Because at the beginning, he's going out, like I say, he makes a few mistakes. He ends up kind of getting his uncle killed. He gets into fights at schools just because he can, and it's a kind of, he abuses his power a little bit. And then, you know, towards the end, when he's kind of come into some fights he probably didn't want to be in because of how Norman Osborn was essentially a father figure to Peter. It just comes down to the fact that, like, he feels more responsible for the power he has now. I mean, for lack of a better phrase, with great power comes great responsibility, which, looking back on it now, is kind of really drives home in that. The second one is about responsibility. Dr. Octopus essentially teaches Peter, you know, if you have this power, you've got to use it for good, which I really enjoyed. You know, he makes some very awful mistakes, but then he has the inhibitor chip blown out, so he can't really be completely blamed for them. But at the end of it, he says, look, irrespective of all of that, even though it wasn't really me, I made these god-awful things, and I've got to fix the problem. And in that film, Peter Parker's been struggling the whole time with, does he need to be Spider-Man? Does, you know, is it what's best for him? It might be best for New York, but is it what's best for him? So that is kind of the big thing there. And then I could talk all day about, you know, the relevance that Sandman has to the plot. But yeah, I've made my point already, essentially.
All right. Yeah, I want to know if I entirely agree with that. It's definitely an interesting point. I feel like the version of Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2, he's great. Alfred Molina is a great actor. There's just something that doesn't quite make sense about him, and I can't quite put my finger on it, so that's kind of a terrible point to bring up on a podcast. But, like, there's just
Nathan,
something...
we have a very easy job here. The one thing you have to do is make a point and then articulate it.
I know, exactly, and I can't even fucking do that. But there's just... I think it's just his way of thinking and his logic, because none of it really seems to make sense. Like, can you explain to me what he wants?
What he wants?
Yeah.
Well, you know, you could go into all the sciencey aspects of it, but what he wants isn't the main drive of the villain's plot because of the inhibitor chip. Essentially, what he thinks he's essentially doing God's work. And he's got a bit of an inflated ego, like, you know, like he doesn't really know who Peter is, but then he starts giving Peter lectures. He clearly thinks very highly of himself and his like abilities.
He definitely does, and I actually quite like that about him.
Yeah, I do as well. But then the inhibitor chip blows, and then he's kind of, all of his bad qualities are essentially amplified. I mean, look, that's what the movie does. I don't know scientifically why that happens, but it does. The claws take over.
I get that. I get what you're saying, but I mean, like, in terms of like his goal, like, is it renewable energy? Is that what he's trying to do?
Yeah, I believe so, and it's for like the whole benefit of New York, and it comes down to the whole, like, you, with regards to hurting and killing some people, it's like the, you know, break a few eggs to make an omelet kind of thing for him, I think.
Okay. So he's just gonna like stand in front of the sun all day long?
I'm sure he's got a continuation plan. I'm sure his idea is not just to chill there for all eternity.
Doc Ock is really good though. I love the design of the arms, and they're mostly practical as well, which is great. There's like puppeteers.
There's Spider-Man 2 gives you the amazing horror scene of like the birth of Doc Ock when he's they're trying to take his arms off through like some big surgery, and there's like a load of surgeons in there and they're all having a laugh.
And I think that's definitely one of the strengths of getting Sam Raimi to direct these movies. He's someone who's known for doing horror. So in sequences like that, he really shines, because that is one of the best sequences in the movie.
Oh, it is.
Up until the point where he screams no, like Darth Vader, anyway, because that's pretty weird.
that was like a weird trope that the world went through, wasn't it? All the bad guys have to scream no.
It's very weird, but I guess that was the mid-2000s for you.
That's true.
Yeah, as well, though, and I know this has been brought up in other places as well, but it's a point I just find hilarious. Doc Ock, for the majority of this movie, doesn't know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and at one point he needs to speak to Peter Parker to find out where Spider-Man is, or where he can get Spider-Man. Yeah. and his plan for doing that is just throw a fucking car at him. This regular human.
Yeah.
Just launch a fucking car straight at him.
I know. Look, you got to throw in some. If you're making a dramatic, emotional movie, you've got to throw in some action for the kids. All right, and that's how movie logic works.
That's fair.
But yeah, no, you are right. You're not going to get very far when you've potentially killed, or at least, you know, like paralyzed a human being.
It would have absolutely killed him. He just launched that car straight through the window. Thank God his spider sense just turned on. Otherwise, both him and MJ would be absolutely dead.
He only saved MJ as well. I'd imagine that car like went further. Imagine this is just a bartender making a cocktail or something. Just decimated. Yeah, they're all gone.
All 100% dead. Yeah. But like I say, Doc Ock, he is really good, and there are some really great action sequences with him, like the train fight and everything like that. Is probably one of the best Spider-Man action sequences there has been. It's incredible. It doesn't really make much sense in terms of story, because Peter should be able to just knock him out with one punch. But in terms of action, it is really good.
That was something I never considered when I was younger. I read it. I think it was in a comic that I read it. I can't remember which one. I think it was a random Spider-Man comic I just picked up. And it was about how Peter Parker always has to pull his punches because he'd just murder people with one like flick if he wanted to.
Exactly.
It's like his ridiculous strength.
It's like in Far From Home, where Flash Thompson just grabs the glasses from Peter, the Edith glasses, and he's trying to get him back, and Peter just like accidentally flicks his wrist, and he just like taps Flash, and it just knocks him the fuck out.
Yeah, he's just out cold.
Yeah, exactly. It's great.
Okay, so what do you think about all the sides and the supportings? You got your Mary Jane, you got your
God.
very dramatic
I
Harry
hate
Osborn.
them all. I hate every
What,
single one of them.
Even Aunt May.
Oh, especially Aunt May. No, that's
What?
no, they're all. I think I've got on one of my notes. Everyone is just the worst. Everyone in Peter's life is just the worst. Harry, I get it. All right, your dad's been killed. Okay, and you think he's been killed by Spider-Man. I get it. All right, that makes sense. But like every 2 seconds, he's like, "Hi, Peter. Happy birthday. Where's Spider-Man? He killed my dad." And it's like, mate, calm the fuck down, all right? And then Mary Jane, like, it's difficult how to phrase this, but Mary Jane's awful in his movies. She really is. She's mostly let down by the writing because she has nothing to do apart from scream and be rescued.
Yeah, and to Sam Raimi's credit, this stems from one of my many issues, which stem across all of these movies, bar maybe the MCU, is the producing team at Sony, and one man in particular whose name is Avi Arad.
No, the worst person in Hollywood.
They just need to be burnt. Like just need to. You don't hire a man like Sam Raimi and then get involved in the creative process. He's arguably one of the best working directors, and it's such a shame because is it Kirsten Dunst or Kristen Dunst?
Kirsten.
She was
Kristen. I don't know.
One of them. The lady, the lovely lady. She only agreed to come back to Spider-Man 3 because of she was promised by Sony many things in terms of her character development, how she was going to get more scenes that weren't just being one of the boys' love interests, and how she was going to do more than scream. And she filmed a lot of those. And guess where they went? All on Sony's cutting room
Straight
floor.
in the bin.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's such a fucking shame.
It is a shame. And it's funny you would say that she had more to do in Spider-Man 3 in terms of character, because that Spider-Man 3 is the one where she is the worst. She is so unlikable in that movie.
Yeah.
Oh my God. In terms of like actual character, she's just mad at Peter all the time. She's jealous because he's getting attention as Spider-Man and she's not, as a kind of a failed actress. And I mean, all right, fair enough. He did kiss another woman on a stage. Probably shouldn't have done that. That was a bit of a dickhead move, Peter. But she's still just the most unlikable character in that movie. Out of the three, that's definitely the worst portrayal of her. And maybe she didn't deserve to be beaten in the face by him, but still, some weird choices in that movie.
Yeah, there really are. Like it's not perfect, and a lot of the stuff is shocking for sake of showing how far the suit has corrupted Peter. And they do have the scapegoat of saying, oh, it's the symbiote taking over Peter's mind. He's not being Peter Parker. But yeah, it is a little bit of a scapegoat. And the previous two movies have had MJ kind of being treated like shit by dudes as well. So it kind of, like in the first one, you've got her dad and you've got her dad shouting at her, like her boyfriend being a bit of a prick. Then you got in the second one.
Is it Flash? Is she dating Flash in the first one?
It is Flash, isn't it?
Yeah, she's dating and Joe Manganiello, wasn't it? Yeah, Deathstroke.
Deathstroke before
Which will probably never happen, by the way.
But thank the Lord. Gosh. Yeah, and then the second one, you've got her being fired by the casting directors who are basically like, honey, you just don't got it. Like, God.
Isn't that the third one?
Is that the third one? I thought it was it might be. It is the third one. No, you are right.
I think it is the third one, yeah, because I just watched the second one, I'm pretty sure.
Damn.
That wasn't there.
I've been fact-checked.
You have indeed.
I'm so embarrassed.
Call me Ben Shapiro. Yeah, that's another thing about the Raimi trilogy. And I don't just want to harp on it, but everyone's way too old.
Yeah, they're in school and they're just straight up 35. Like I think there's one scene in Spider-Man 1 where the teacher actually looks younger than the kids, which is brilliant.
I've got one note here because I did just watch Spider-Man 2. It's a quote from one of the passengers on the train. He says, "He's just a kid, no older than my son," and then I cut to a shot of a 43-year-old man.
It's true. Look, he's obviously playing a younger. This was before studios trusted kid actors to hold franchises. I see why. Some of the extras in this, some of the kid actors they have to work with, who's the one guy that gives Peter his mask back and says, "We don't tell nobody."
We found something.
Yeah, they're pretty bad.
They're pretty bad, yeah.
They are. But look, let's move on to the far more divisive 1 and 2 Amazing Spider-Mans.
Well, I feel like, if I may, because I have been very harsh on the Raimi trilogy, and I don't want to come across like I hate it, because I actually do really like those movies. They definitely do have their highlights. What would you say are your favorite either characters or moments of that trilogy, just really quickly?
Okay, so you've got the train sequence, not just I don't actually care so much for the fight. I think it's a great fight.
Yeah.
I like, although I literally mere seconds ago mugged it off. I really, really enjoy the interaction between the guys on the train and Peter's mask coming off, and I love the sheer panic on his face when he realizes his mask isn't on, but then everyone else around him's like, "That's cool, bro, no worries."
I definitely think that's something the Raimi trilogy, not so much in the third one, but more in the first two, does, is the sort of the relationship between Spider-Man and New York itself. There's the moment on the bridge in the first one where they're all throwing stuff at Green Goblin and everything like that. And I always kind of like,
you mess with all of us.
Yeah, exactly. And I do love the depiction of New York in these movies, especially because it's just so grounded and greasy, and everyone's there's angry cab drivers, and I was like, "Whoa, you stole that guy's pizza!"
It's the most Sam Raimi New York there could have possibly ever been.
And I think it's probably, out of the three, it's probably the best interpretation of New York, or the best adaptation.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Well, I did just want to say as well, obviously, J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson.
How have we not touched on this yet?
Yeah, possibly the most perfect comic book casting there has ever been, because my God,
he does definitely make a brilliant Commissioner Gordon. Nathan, you're absolutely right. No, he's brilliant. The inclusion of it's basically they're mini shorts, aren't they? All of his scenes, and they're led by him perfectly. You've got is it Betsy Brunt in there? Betty, is it? And then you've got the other guy, the guy who's Spider-Man's not a menace.
Robbie,
that guy, he's great. And then you've got Sam Raimi's brother who's in it.
Is he the other guy, the weedy one?
Yeah, the nerdy one. Yeah. They're a great little dynamic. They work really well, and Peter's always this is also normal for them. Jonah's behavior is so normal, but Peter always stands out like a sore thumb in those scenes, and it's so good.
Any scene with JK in those movies is definitely a lesson, and obviously there's a reason they brought him back to the MCU, just because he just absolutely nails it. I mean, you can't get a better J. Jonah Jameson, and I think that's probably why he wasn't in the Amazing Spider-Man movies as well. Because
I noticed that the only thing you see of Jonah Jameson or J. Jonah Jameson is one email,
an email,
and then Peter mentions him once. I think that's about it.
That is it. But because how can you do it? You just can't really, can you?
And they knew that. They had to have known that. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. A lot more divisive, these ones, I would say.
Yeah.
Look, my personal opinion of these, I remember the first one coming out, and I was so excited. So excited. I saw it with a bunch of mates, went to the cinema, and it was, I loved it. I loved every second of it. I thought it was, at that point, I was just old enough to be oh, dark and gritty is cool. Like it was that kind of, we were prime Chris Nolan Batman era at this point, so I preferred the grittier superhero takes. And this film was 1,000,000% marketed towards it. Look, Mark Webb is an amazing director. He's brilliant.
Really
at
is.
Simple human connections, improvised
500
moments.
Days of Summer is probably one of my favorite films of all time. It's a great movie.
It's brilliant, and it's that you can so tell that Mark Webb directed this, and especially the scenes between Peter and Gwen. They're just so touching. Scenes between Peter and Aunt May. Uncle Ben leaves a little bit to be desired. I think he serves his purpose well, but the Raimi ones were way more of a father-son relationship that I actually believed. I thought the Uncle Ben in these movies was a little bit of a letdown, but it carried brilliantly by Sally Field's Aunt May. So I like it. My main enemy in these is Sony. Sony just put their fingers in where they weren't needed. And I really genuinely believe they fucked up what could have been a brilliant version of this character.
I would actually completely agree with you for the most part. Yeah, I definitely like the first one more than the second, and I think probably a lot of people would say that. However, I don't think Amazing Spider-Man 2 is anywhere near as bad as most people think it is.
Absolutely
I think
not.
there's some really great moments in that movie. I think for Amazing Spider-Man 2, I think there's the main things that went wrong with that movie are, number one, the marketing, because Sony, in their infinite wisdom, just showed fucking everything in the marketing. Like, they held nothing back whatsoever and just pretty much showed you the entire movie.
The tagline of the first one's poster as well, just to touch on marketing, was the untold origin story. And then it ended up just being a subplot about Peter's parents that went nowhere.
Yeah, it really didn't. But yeah, marketing was definitely a big letdown of that movie. But also, there was just so much going on in it. Like, they were trying to do too many things. Like, they were trying to set up the Sinister Six, but then also carry on this romance between Peter and Gwen, but then also kill Gwen off, but then also explore the backstory of Peter's parents, but then also add in an element of how Peter was always destined to be Spider-Man, but then also add in Harry Osborn as Green Goblin as well. They were just trying to throw in like 60 years worth of comic book history into one movie.
It takes away what I loved about the first one was the simplicity to it. And yeah, look, the Curtis Connors, the lizard things, right? It's not great. They weren't the best choices for the front villain, but it served its purpose well enough. And I thoroughly got on board with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I think, and this is coming back to what I said earlier that I said I'd touch on, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, for me, is the most comic book accurate Spider-Man. Not Peter Parker, Spider-Man.
Okay.
And I...
He's, I see what you're saying. He's definitely very, very accurate in terms of like this sort of happy-go-lucky, quippy sort of superheroes just basically having fun with it. Yeah. Really.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I think... there's a few things that I think the Raimi films did better in terms of, like I said, Peter in the Raimi films was a bit irresponsible when he first got his powers. And I think this version of Andrew Garfield's version comes across like just a little bit of a dick at times. And it misses the mark of just misguided kid, and more so it just seems like a power-hungry prick at certain points. But yeah, no, these movies, I think they're so brilliantly done in terms of character, and I think
you're absolutely right. Yeah,
Mark Webb is brilliant at character and Sony isn't, and that can be seen in the relationship between Peter and Aunt May, Peter and Gwen, and Peter and Captain Stacy. All very serious, not serious, but like their relationships are taken seriously in the movie. And then you want to look at Sony's involvement and all the characters they push for. Rhino is not a character that would ever exist in that capacity because no one is like that. The German doctor, the stereotype of the...
Oh my God, that is the worst.
It's so bad. And the worst thing is about it is it's so obviously an attempt by Sony to be funny, and it's so not funny. Like,
it's just awkward. I remember seeing that in the cinema itself and just going, what the fuck is going on? Why is there suddenly a cartoonish mad scientist in this movie?
Yeah.
It just comes out of nowhere.
It looks, and it's fucking that. Like, I feel bad for the actor because I'm assuming it's a payday for him, and he's just got his lines and gone, "Fuck it, yeah, go for it." Spider-Man movie, why not?
Yeah.
It might be his big break. But the actor, he's just not funny. Like, he's not a funny guy.
No.
Like, they didn't even cast someone that had good comedic timing for the. Like, I'd forgive it if it was jokes that people sometimes found funny. You know, like, comedy is subjective, but no one can argue that those scenes are objectively funny because they've got Electro, another character that I think is a bit heavy-handed. I feel Jamie Foxx is an amazing actor, but this character, they just kind of clearly were writing his lines of dialogue on the day. Like, it was like, it's not a very well put together concept. I don't want to trash on him too much because I think he was incredibly excited to do this movie, and I think he was quite let down by the response to his character.
I think that's true. Which has recently been made evident as well.
Yeah, definitely. I just think that it perfectly embodies just Mark Webb trying his best to make a good movie, and Sony just coming in and fucking, you know, just nailing points home about toys and selling merch and making blockbusters and let's get on the wave of the MCU quickly. Let's set up a Spider-Man universe with the Sinister Six.
That was absolutely the biggest thing because like this was 2014, so Avengers had already come out. They were building up Phase 2, so Sony were just massively trying to push for their own extended universe, like a lot of other studios were at the time, and it was the downfall, really, because they didn't take the time to do it properly. They just tried to rush it all through in one movie, and it's never going to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's Batman versus Superman all over again, really. Obviously, different studios, exactly. But like you say, the concept of just trying to get in line with Disney's sales, like, it will never happen. Like, even thinking about it, the MCU has no business being as successful as it is. Like, it's just an anomaly that happened because the right people at the right time collaborated, and it will.
I don't know if I agree with that necessarily because I'd say because they took the time. Like, you go back to the first Iron Man movie, there's no real mention of this extended universe. It's not until the post-credit scene that there's a hint of it, really.
Yeah, no, that's true. I just mean in the sense that they were like, they got the right people to make the right creative choices, like a team that were passionate over a team that wanted to make the quick money, which I think definitely shows. But yeah, man, like this version of Peter Parker as a character, not Spider-Man, I think he's just a bit too cool. Like I think at this time,
isn't it? Yeah,
like in 2012, this was the whole like the hipster kid was like the skater guy was like the nerd, and it's just not the case anymore because like watching these movies now, like Peter Parker's not like universally popular, but like there's a scene in Amazing Spider-Man 2 that I don't really take kindly to, not in a way that it's like personally offended me. Sounded really dramatic, but like in the sense like he runs on the stage after being like pretty late to collect his, like, I guess it's a degree they get for finishing high school in America. I don't know how it works.
A diploma.
Yeah,
diploma.
So he runs on stage, and Gwen's on stage because she's like, you know, she's that main bitch that they choose or something.
Valedictorian.
That's the one. Thank you for the terms. And Peter just like basically bends her over and just gets off with her. Like
bends her over.
He does, like, you know.
He doesn't quite bend her over. You're making it sound like he just rails her right on stage.
Look, what I'm saying is Gwen Stacy gets her back broken in twice in this movie, Nathan. That's all I'm saying.
Brutal.
No, look, but it's that kind of thing that, like, I don't think any version of Peter Parker would ever do that.
No, yeah, he is definitely a bit too cool there. I think they put like quite a bit of like Andrew Garfield flair into him, and it kind of works for the movie, I guess, but it doesn't really work for Peter Parker the character.
Yeah, that's it. That's the point exactly. It's not I don't dislike it, but I cannot say that he's on par with. I genuinely believe he's my favorite Spider-Man. I love the jokes he makes, despite the fact that, you know, when he's chatting with Rhino at the beginning, like the interactions he's having are brilliant, and they're very classic Spider-Man. The whole like, oh, your gun doesn't work. Let me fix that for you. Let me help you. And just making very bad like quips and jokes. They work really well. Like, you kind of have to overlook the fact that about 50 people probably died in the time that Spider-Man took to tell those jokes.
Probably.
But there's like, obviously that's just because it's a movie and things have to happen. But
one of the scenes that really stand out to me with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, I think it's an Amazing Spider-Man 2, is the one where there's that little kid getting bullied, and like Spider-Man just like, he doesn't obviously do anything because they're just kids, but he just kind of like stares at them and scares them off. And then he just walks home with the kid and talks to him about like his science project that he made and like fixes it up for him.
Yeah,
and tells him like how cool it is and everything. Yeah, exactly. I think that's just a really cool moment.
That's the kid at the end that stands up to Rhino as well.
Exactly.
And then I really like that because he comes over to him and the kid's dressed as Spider-Man, and Spider-Man comes back in after like a couple of months of not doing it. And then you hear him as kind of like broken Peter Parker voice in the background going, "Hey, Spider-Man." And he turns around and it is a good moment. Like, look, for all of these flaws, I think everyone involved in the creative process gave it their all. They were just so let down by a team that weren't ready to let the filmmaker make the film.
Definitely. Like we said, they're just trying to rush to their own universe. I think another thing, which, and you've already mentioned it, but it really is the heart of these movies, is Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield. Their relationship is just so, and it's easy to see why they became an actual couple as well, because they have incredible chemistry, and their relationship is probably the most believable Spidey relationship we've seen on screen anyway. I completely agree.
And there's times where, again, you can see Sony's involvement with this, because there are lovely moments which are clearly improvised between them because they're both phenomenally talented actors. And there's very obvious moments that are very like cute and improv-y, and you just there's moments that you couldn't have scripted to go that well, and they did. And then you get moments where he's like stood on a bridge and the lines are like, "I love you, Gwen. I'm going to follow you. I'll never stop following you." And it's like, okay, thanks, Sony. I got it.
There you go. Yeah.
But yeah, no,
you're
all in all,
right, yeah.
I think we both kind of agree on that Mark Webb wanted to make some wicked movies, and Sony weren't ready to take their hands off the biggest property that they had.
One thing I do just want to pick up on as well, in terms of these movies, I think out of the 3 on-screen live action anyway iterations we've got, I think this one has the best music as well. I think the music in, especially in Amazing Spider-Man 2, is just incredible. I love that soundtrack so much.
Oh, Nathan, look, I liked the Spider-Man theme. Right, actually, hang on. I'm gonna say the best statement that I have to sum this up. My favorite Spider-Man score was the trailer version for Far From Home. I just love it. I don't know why. I love that version of the Spider-Man theme. Favorite score for me is Danny Elfman. I can't not love his. Maybe it's the nostalgia talking because he did all the Raimi movies.
I think that's 100% the nostalgia talking, because that score is dead.
Nathan, tell me, what is it about Skrillex you love so much in the second one, in The Amazing Spider-Man 2?
Because I think, you're right, it is dubstep and Skrillex, but I think it works for that movie, though. It works with Electro.
Hang on, is it actually Skrillex?
No, it's not a Skrillex. It's like fucking DJ Jazzy Jeff or some shit. That's not who it is.
Who's Jazzy Jeff?
It's Hans. Jazzy Jeff is fucking Will Smith's DJ.
Oh, I have no idea about this. I'm well out of touch with the kids.
Young. This isn't kids. This isn't an adult thing. You think kids listen to Will Smith?
Oh, I see. That explains how you know it, because you're elderly.
Shut up. No, but like it's Hans Zimmer who does the score, and then he got other people to collaborate with him as well.
That's very evident. I don't. Imagine Hans Zimmer giving this the likes of Nolan.
What do you mean,
mate? Look, this score, I like it. Okay, I like the Spider-Man themes. I don't like the dubstep. I think it's so in your face. It's so loud.
I love it, man. I think the Times Square sequence, which I think on its own is a great sequence anyway, but I think it's made even more so by the music and by the, like, it gives you glimpses into Electro's head as well, like the voices and everything like that. And I just think all together it all adds to this incredible sequence. Yeah, sure, it's loud and it's definitely in your face, and it's, you know, like dubstep in a Spider-Man movie sounds almost unheard of, but there's just something about that new aspect and sort of out there-ness of it which just really works for me.
Look, I appreciate it because it's a big, bold swing. I completely get that. Like, I imagine it was a very hard time getting a dubstep Spider-Man theme greenlit. However, yeah, I like it up until that voices point. I think that really took me out of that scene, and I love that. Like, I will praise these movies until the day I die, essentially. But that sequence I love. I love that sequence. The whole, you know, how you can hear Peter kind of actually scared of Max by the end.
Yeah.
And how Max is terrified of being irrelevant, and how Peter doesn't remember him, and he needs him to remember him, and then he just gets very overwhelmed. And I really like that.
And how there's a guy in the crowd with a feed directly into all the screens in Times Square. That's really helpful as well.
Is there?
Yeah, there's a guy like filming it on a camera, and it just suddenly shows up on all the billboards around Times Square.
Yeah, no, never mind. Like, some of them ads have probably cost people like tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
But they've got a live feed Spider-Man having a little beef.
Just some random bloke's got his camera out and he's tapped in.
He's got a GoPro on him and he's ready. No, but look, it's just the voices that took me out of that score. Like the lyrics, like, he lied to me, he shot at me, or something like that. Look, I get your point. I get you're meant to be in Electro's head, but I feel like Electro's dialogue already does that job. Like, I wasn't sat there going, I wonder what Electro's thinking right now.
No,
it's a very obvious scene.
Yeah, it's very obvious. I just think it's another layer to it, which I know for me it works. I liked it.
Fair enough. I guess.
Also, as well, I think there's some really good cinematography in Amazing Spider-Man 2 as well.
You're absolutely right.
There's one shot in particular, more towards the end, where Spider-Man is swinging towards the power station thing, the Oscorp power grid, and there's just a moment where he leaps over a building and everything just slows down for a second, and like the lightning is striking through the air and everything like that, and it's just like a slow motion shot which only lasts about 2 seconds of him just heading towards it. I just think that's great.
Oh, yeah. My favorite all-time Spider-Man shot is the opening of Amazing Spider-Man 2. I say the opening is actually a scene of, for some reason, like a spy espionage movie between Peter's parents. I mean, the real opening scene of that movie.
Of him falling,
of that, and then obviously no one knows how he got so high.
It's weird,
but it is weird. But I love the way it fades in. Then it's the Spider-Man logo. Then it's his back, and then it's the city of New York. Like in the skyline.
I like in that moment as well that his suit is actually rippling as he falls as well. That's just a nice little touch. All right, we've been going way too long. Let's move on to MCU.
Okay, look, you said earlier this was your favorite version of Spider-Man, so hit me up. Why do you think so?
I just think there's just so much that this nails, essentially. It's probably all right. Yeah, let's get out of the way. It takes place in a larger universe, so it definitely has that to help it out. Iron Man is there. There's the whole Avengers aspect and everything like that. So that's already a leg up for most people. But like, just in terms of the actual Spider-Man movies themselves, Homecoming, I think you have one of the best on-screen Spider-Man villains you've ever had in Michael Keaton and the Vulture. He is so good in that movie, man.
And he's like embedded in the comic book lore, essentially. Like, I love the fact, right? People give this movie a bit of shit because everything that Peter does is essentially got something to do with Iron Man. While for the most part, I kind of understand the criticism because obviously I love Spider-Man as an independent character. I loved Spider-Man before I knew who Iron Man even was as a character. So I like to see him doing his own thing, obviously. But in this universe, like you say, yes, it's a leg up and it very much needs to be that version. But yeah, no, this villain of Vulture, played by Michael Keaton, like you said, is just amazing. The way it ties into, like, it cuts back to him cleaning up the mess in the Avengers and how he essentially lost the contracts, lost his job, and like it shows you like how working class people are actually affected when like the Avengers, like the Avengers get to go home to their like $1 million compounds and just chill out and not work and do anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I really liked it.
We all love Tony Stark because we know him, and we know his story and everything like that. But he's still a billionaire. Like, he's still someone who profited off, for a large portion of his life, was profiting off war crimes and weapons and everything like that.
Dude, do you remember when you first saw this? You texted me saying there was a line. There was a line that you couldn't help but really agree with, and it was and it was Peter saying to Vulture, like you're selling weapons that are dangerous. You're gonna get people hurt, and he says, "Oh, how do you think your buddy Stark got all his millions or something?"
Exactly,
and it's 100% true. Like, at that point of your Peter, you kind of have to go fair fucks, mate. Crack on.
But, you can fault Adrian Timms for what he's doing, but he's absolutely, I wouldn't say he's justified, but he has a point. Like, you can see why he's doing what he's doing. He wants to feed his family. He wants to make sure his daughter has a good life, and he wants to make sure his wife is taken care of and everything like that. Which is exactly what he was trying to do. He was trying to do it safely and legally and doing it properly through the correct channels. But then the rich and the billionaires and the government fucked him over. So he thought, all right, I'll try it this way then. If I can't do it that way, I'll do it this way and just go about it. And that's, but also he's terrifying as well, though. Like, the scene in the car where he's just where he just slowly figures it out and he just pieces it all together. That is a great sequence.
That sequence is fucking amazing, and I think John Watts doesn't get enough credit for directing that sequence. Like, the way, the second that he realizes, and then the red light shines on his face.
Oh yeah,
from the traffic lights is fucking brilliant. Like, it's such a well directed sequence, and to be honest, Tom Holland, for me, like, yes, I believe him as Spider-Man. Yes, I really enjoy his interpretation. But up until that moment, it's kind of been a little bit fun. Like, even when he was having the fights with the Vulture, it was very much so. Like, Karen was chatting to him in his suit, and it was very fun. The activate instant kill mode. Like, they're all good jokes. That was the first moment where you see this version of Peter Parker go, "Oh, I'm in some shit."
That was like that moment, and then one a little bit later on in the warehouse is where you like have the sort of moment of thinking, oh yeah, this is just a kid. This is a 15-year-old boy, okay, and he's trying to. He's out of his league. There's no other way to put it. He's massively out of his league, but he's still gonna try, and he's still gonna do what he can, really, because that's who Spider-Man is.
Yeah, and I think this is a great movie because I love the aspect of it. This was the reason I really, really enjoyed Tony Stark's presence in this movie, is because of the fact that he gives him... Tony is the irresponsible guy that we all know he is, who tries to be a lot more responsible in his later days in the MCU. But he gives a kid like essentially like an assassin's skill set, like and goes, "Here you go," and then tells him to go and save like cats from trees. like with a suit that's like designed for mass murder.
He does, but to be fair to Tony Stark, he did restrict it though. Like it was all blocked off so Peter couldn't access that. Like there was the training wheels protocol and everything like that.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, there was. Okay, I'll take it back. God, I need to be more informed, Nathan. I need to.
You do, yeah, exactly.
It's almost like this was the only one I didn't rewatch for this podcast.
No.
Okay, so what do you think about the people around him? Because obviously we know Tony Stark's in this, but this is a very, very different Aunt May. We've never seen Ned in a movie before, and in this movie at least, this version of Zendaya's version of MJ wasn't really even MJ until the end, and even at the end, it was just speculation.
It's not MJ. It's Michelle. She's not. Well, she is MJ. She's just not Mary Jane.
Yeah,
That's it. They're just sort of going with their own thing, really. And yeah, I don't mind that. It is what it is, really. I like Zendaya as the character herself. Zendaya is great, and she plays that part really well. Just that whole sort of like weird and off nature about her. Just the kind of like weird loner girl, essentially. But
Far From Home does that relationship so many favors as well. Like I liked it in the first one, and it is very like weird and awkward and everything like that.
They're so awkward together, but I think that definitely works in its favor.
The big kiss in a traditional like superhero movie, you have the big kiss at the end. The whole like the hero stops the villain, but like the kiss in this, like Peter's just in the middle in Far From Home. Sorry, Peter's just in the middle of like chatting, and she just gives him the most like awkward teenager kiss I've ever seen in my life. And
because that's what they are. They're just teenagers.
Yeah, it fits the movie so well. Like the tone of it works really well.
It really does.
But yeah, anyway, this is just welcome back to just two men in their 20s talking about teenagers kissing.
I do like the supporting cast though. I really like Ned. He's great in the movies. I understand why some people have a problem with Ned, in particular, being like Spider-Man's best friend, because traditionally that's a Miles Morales character. That's usually Miles's best friend.
Oh shit, it is. I never even thought about that, actually.
Oh really?
Yeah,
that's.
Oh my god, of course. Yeah. Fuck.
Yeah.
God, I'm having an epiphany live on the pod, Nathan. Isn't this rare?
And a lot of the criticisms of the sort of MCU Spider-Man is that they have just given a lot of Miles's characteristics to this one, and I can definitely understand why people would have a problem with that. In terms, well, there's a whole range of issues around it which I'm not qualified to talk about, but I just like Ned though. He's just a great character. The relationship between them is just, you can tell like these are two people who've just been friends for a long time. Like they don't really have any secrets between each other. And Ned is like, he's kind of a gigantic nerd. But everyone seems to really like him anyway. Like no one really has a problem with Ned, which I just like.
There's always that kid in school that's like you don't know why everyone likes him, but they do.
Yeah.
Because to be fair, like Ned he's the sweetest. He's such a cool guy.
He's so sweet. Yeah,
and he does exude that energy of just like being super chill. So no, he's a very likable character. I'm gonna throw you in with my own hot take. I'm not gonna swear. I feel like that emphasizes it too much because I don't feel that strongly about it. I could do without this version of Aunt May, if I'm honest.
Really?
Yeah, I don't.
Why?
One, I don't appreciate the Tony Stark flirting with her kind of thing. I think it's a funny joke, but it kind of dilutes the impact that Uncle Ben would have had on this Peter. I think basically, right. I don't know whether it's just because, again, I appreciate the Raimi movies over most. I feel like Peter Parker grew up the way he did, being this relatable kid from Queens, just because of like how Aunt May and Uncle Ben raised him to be. Because it's so evident in like the comics and then in the Raimi movies, like Peter shares the characteristics that Uncle Ben does, and it's, you know, like, unfortunately, it's why Uncle Ben dies, because he's not got the powers that Peter ends up having, but he still wants to stand up for the little guy kind of thing. And I just feel like this version of Aunt May, I just genuinely believe that whilst it's a good portrayal, and you can see that, you know, Marissa Tomei obviously does a good performance, I don't like the direction of the character. I don't think that Peter would have learned any, like, kind of... I don't think he would have learned any, like, important lessons that Peter Parker should have learned before becoming Spider-Man from that version of Aunt May. And then I don't like how okay she is with him being Spider-Man. Like, she's just not worried. And if anything, she's way more encouraging of it in Far From Home.
But to be fair, I think I see what you're saying, but a lot of what you're saying is stuff related to stuff we haven't seen, though, like what came before this started, essentially, like when Ben was still alive and everything like that. We haven't seen anything of that.
No, I agree.
And we also haven't, like, at the end of Homecoming, she finds out that he's Peter Parker, and then by the next time we see him in Infinity War, it's like a year later or so. And so there's been time for her to get used to she wasn't. She screamed at him when she found out. She clearly wasn't okay with it. I think, obviously, over time, she's come to accept it. I think definitely, we could have done with a scene or something explaining what that was and why she was okay with it. We could have definitely done with that.
Yeah, but I feel like you say, I appreciate that it's all like stuff that's before. And don't get me wrong, I was more than happy and more than okay with Homecoming not being an origin story of Spider-Man. And it kind of was. It was a hidden origin in terms of Peter becoming the real hero that is Spider-Man. But yeah, we didn't see him get bitten by the spider and all of that, which I liked. I don't get, like, this is not me saying I wanted to see an on-screen Uncle Ben. I genuinely don't care about seeing an on-screen Uncle Ben. I would have liked to have heard him maybe referenced a bit more, just because of how big of a part he plays on Peter in his adolescence, to be honest. Just in terms of a character preference, that's what kind of I think about it.
I see what you're saying. I just come at it from the point of, we don't need it, because we've seen it so many times, though. We've seen it with Raimi. We've seen it with Mark Webb. We've seen that storyline play out. We've seen the angsty teenager be sad over his uncle dying.
No, I agree. But I just feel like that's, you know, like, just because we've seen it in other movies, like, in an origin story, the purpose of it is to tell the audience how he got those powers, kind of thing. That's essentially what it is. And we've seen that. And if you're alive today and you're an adult and you still don't know how Peter Parker got his powers, despite it being one of the most popular, like, pop culture references, I'd be very shocked. So we definitely don't need to see him get bitten. I completely am fine with that. But this is a new interpretation of the character, and therefore I'd like to see what made the character think the way he does. And I don't need, like, flashback after flashback after flashback. I mean, just like a little thing every now and again. Like, it would have been perfect in the scene in Civil War when he says, "Oh, I like the moment where he says, you know, when you can do what I can do and then you don't, and then bad things happen, they happen because of you." I would have loved just like another line in that about, like, my Uncle Ben used to say this or whatever. Like, I just feel like they missed that mark a little bit, and I've gone a bit off topic because I'm now speaking about Uncle Ben more than Aunt May, but I just feel like this Aunt May she doesn't add anything. She doesn't subtract anything either, but Aunt May should add to the personality of Peter. She's his moral compass in the comics.
I would massively disagree with you saying she doesn't add anything.
Really? Okay, what do you like about her then?
She's
sexy.
She's hot. Yeah. No, she's, I don't know. There's just she's obviously younger, and she's much more, like, kind of fun and relatable to this version of Peter. Like, the relationship is just more believable. Like, because obviously with the Raimi, it's a very old lady, and they don't really kind of have any back and forth. Or there's not really much fun between them. There is a little bit, but with Marissa Tomei, they're just able to build on that relationship and show two people who clearly love each other and clearly have this familial bond, but can also just have fun and make fun of each other and everything like that, which they do, and I really like. In terms of like Uncle Ben, I don't know. Yeah, I just don't think we need it again. The idea of him not being brought up, I guess it just doesn't faze me, just because I know, like, I know Peter.
That's fair. That is fair.
Like I know that story. He's been affected from it. I don't need to be reminded of it. What I like to see is it explored in new ways, because he still goes. You could argue that he still goes through all of that with Tony Stark. And yeah, I understand a lot of people would have a problem with Tony Stark replacing Uncle Ben.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. I don't.
Why?
Look, I just feel like the lessons that Uncle Ben teaches Peter are very much so like, do what you think is right. Listen to what you want to do. And Tony is like, even after he goes through his kind of, not a redemption arc, so to speak, but even after he becomes a far more compassionate person, like Civil War and thereafter, I just feel like he can't really be that guy. Like, I like the moments where he says, you're supposed to be better than me. There's a really good line that he says. Can you remember it?
Yeah.
Off the top of your head.
Yes. Peter says, I just wanted to be like you. And then Stark says, I wanted you to be better than me.
Yeah, and so that's great. And I like that. I really, really do. But I don't know. I just... Look, maybe it's a personal preference kind of thing. I just would have liked to have seen more of a backstory there with regards to like someone else being his father figure. Like, I'm completely fine with Peter idolizing Tony, because if you grow up in that MCU world, why wouldn't you?
Yeah,
like most kids would grow up and be like, I want to be like Iron Man kind of thing.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you? Obviously, but I just think he needed a personal thing. Like, he's something that taught him, that moment that you were speaking about, like the never give up moment where the building falls on him in Homecoming, and he essentially is just a kid under a fuckload of debris, and he has to get himself out of it.
He is just a screaming child, essentially.
That's like a perfect moment where like he doesn't need to draw on what Tony's told him. Because what Tony's told him is to like hang back and look after the little guy and blah 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 and be a hero and all of this and stay in your lane kind of thing up until that point. At that point, he needs to draw from another guiding figure, which I think is always perfectly personified by Uncle Ben. And I just feel like that movie, it doesn't detract from that moment. I think that's one of my favorite MCU Spider-Man scenes, if not my favorite MCU Spider-Man scene. But I just feel like it would have been a nice inclusion. But we didn't get it, and that's fine. But, just personal preference, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I guess I just see a lot of people who have that problem, the problem you have with Tony Stark and everything like that. The way I see it is that, and this will probably sound harsh, but it's like you just want it to be the same as the Raimis and what came before. You just want it to be the same as the story essentially. And because it's something new, because it's something different, that just freaks a lot of people out. That's probably not the case. Like I said, there is absolutely valid criticisms of it. That's just the way I personally see it.
Yeah, like, don't get me wrong, right? You're bringing... I completely understand why. Like, you're bringing Spider-Man into the MCU. Who's the face of the MCU? Like, you're obviously going to have him play an enormous part. And it works perfectly because in that universe, it's not the same universe as the Raimi movies at all. Like, it's so different. So you're going to have a different Spider-Man that reflects that different time and setting. But, yeah, no, I just feel like, for me... I feel like some of the like making it inclusive with like Iron Man and building it into the MCU, occasionally they missed out on a few key moments that I think make Peter and Spider-Man essentially. But that doesn't detract. Like I've even said in my notes, well, actually, the first one I was going to say is finally an actor that looks like he's at school. And then the second one I said was that I don't overly relate to this MCU Peter so much as I did with the others. And that's like, I get your point, but I don't think for me that's just that I want it to be the Raimi movies. I don't want the Raimi movies in the MCU, obviously. Like they would look so out of place and weird. And Tom Holland playing that version of Peter it would just be a bit shit, I think. But yeah, I feel like by them relying on Iron Man to build up so much of his hero training and how he sees being a superhero it just detracts a little bit, because a lot of Peter's strength comes from how he was raised, and the whole idea is that Spider-Man isn't the hero, it's just Peter wearing a mask. Like Spider-Man's
I think that's kind of the idea and sort of the beauty of Far From Home.
That was the next thing in my notes.
All right, yeah, because like a big part of Far From Home is that Tony's dead, and Peter doesn't have. Spoiler alert! Sorry. Peter's essentially on his own now. He doesn't have the Avengers. He doesn't have Tony to bail him out or anything like that. He's got to do this on his own, really. And I think that is a big part of that movie, of him coming into his own and becoming his own superhero, essentially.
Yeah, no, I'd say that's fair. Like I said, I've put in my notes. I really enjoy how Far From Home attempted to liberate Peter. Whole like there's a moment with him on the plane.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a great moment
where he builds a suit and
but then also the thing that Happy says to him, that says like, I don't think he would have did what he did if he didn't know that you were going to be here. Whilst I think is a bit weird, because Tony does have like a whole team of Avengers that are like a lot more trained than him. But yeah, no, like I get the point. Like he was raising him up to be like a prodigy kind of thing. And like a little apprentice. He really was,
because you're right. He did have a team. He did have the Avengers and people he knew he could count on. But also his relationship with Peter was massively different than it was with the other team. Clearly, Peter was like a surrogate son for him. Like, Tony's obviously got a lot of daddy issues that's relevant throughout the entire MCU. And obviously he's projecting a lot of that onto Peter and trying to do better, essentially.
He was essentially trying to build himself the way he wanted people to see him, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. You're absolutely right to use my famous catchphrase.
Nice.
What was I going to say? Far From Home. We are running so long. I don't know how long we've been recording, but I imagine
this is going to be a long one. If you've stuck with us this way, and we appreciate it. It is slightly a longer episode than normal, but this is our first special where we're covering more than one film, essentially. Like Nathan said at the beginning, we're attempting to go through like 11 films of Spider-Man. so it's going to be longer. Exactly. So you know what? It's free content. Just fucking stream it.
And rate it 5 stars.
Yeah, exactly.
What did you think of Mysterio, Jake Shaw? Because let me tell you, all right, Spider-Man I've always loved Spider-Man. Spider-Man has arguably one of, if not the greatest rogues gallery. Out of the selection of villains he has so many to choose from. All of them are so weird and amazing, but my favorite has always been Mysterio, and I was so happy that they are finally bringing him to the movies.
Yeah.
What did you think of him?
Right, so firstly, I was so shocked when he was the villain. Said no one ever. No,
I didn't see it coming.
Yeah, wowee, what? It was impossible to avoid. I like that though, because the film is very self-aware of that, and it knows that you're not ever going to see him as a good guy. So they kind of sow the seeds of deception very early on into the movie. No, I like it. Look, I'm always here for Jake Gyllenhaal, Yelan Haler, or whatever his surname is.
It's Gyllenhaal.
Gyllenhaal, yeah. I'm always down for him in any role. Like, he's an actor. I think he's so versatile, and in this, like, he's so obviously been waiting for Marvel on the phone because he's just so invested in this performance, and it's so good. Like, the moment where Peter leaves the bar and like they're both feeling great about the conversation they've had. Peter feels like he's got a weight off his shoulders because he's handed over his Edith glasses to Mysterio, and then the second he leaves, and Mysterio just is a different character. Like, he's like, it's
that is one of the best scenes in the entire movie. I usually hate exposition and info dumps in movies. Usually they don't work.
And it's a big one. It's a very big one.
Oh, but this movie has two of them. This movie has two. One being this one. The other being, I fucking love it as well, right at the beginning when they do the school news report and it just gives you all the information on what happened with the snap and everything like that. But also they clearly edited by a 15-year-old kid on iMovie tribute to the fallen Avengers and everything.
Yeah, no, it is great.
It is great, yeah. But this info dump in particular, this exposition scene, it's just so good. It's because you have Jake Gyllenhaal being absolutely weird and insane, like Jake Gyllenhaal does best. But then also the way they tie it into like past MCU movies as well, like it ties into Civil War, it ties into Iron Man 1, and everything like that.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave
with a box of scraps.
Yeah, they bring that bald guy back. Not the same guy.
The same guy, actually.
Shut up!
I thought it wasn't at first because it kind of looks like CGI when they did the flashback, but no, it's literally the exact same actor.
Oh my god, the commitment! Marvel have these guys balls and vices in any contract. You could be an extra, like having a sip of coffee in the background of like one Avengers scene from a deleted scene. They got you
for 20 movies,
and they'll need you. They'll need you to come running. That's it. No, I love Mysterio. I think he's a great addition to this. And like you say, the info dumps that they give him, they don't give him particularly easy dialogue, but he really works it. And to be honest, this whole interpretation of Mysterio, like not being this like sorcerer, wizard, weirdo that he is in the comics, and actually just being
a guy
that's like clever at illusions, is a good liar, and it like knows how to trick shit essentially. It completely makes sense for this day and age why they choose that version.
And
of
they
Mysterio.
could have gone with the more comic version as well. Like, there's no reason why they couldn't have done like illusions and sorcery, because that exists in this universe. You know, we've seen Doctor Strange and everything like that. They easily could have related him to that sort of magical world. But they definitely, the way they did it with the hologram technology and the drones and everything like that, and the fact that his actual suit, not Mysterio suit, but what Jake Gyllenhaal is actually wearing, is just like a standard like CGI suit. I love that so much.
It's the mocap
just
suit,
the standard
isn't it?
mocap suit. Yeah, I think that's just such a great choice. And the fact that they actually gave him the fishbowl head. I was so scared they wouldn't. I was terrified that they would do some...
I think I saw so many tweets that were saying, give him the fishbowl, you cowards. Like, let's see it.
And as well, I think the best ever, for me personally, the best ever sequence in a Spider-Man movie is that illusion sequence in this movie. The one where Mysterio is just going full Mysterio, essentially, and giving Peter all those illusions. That is torn right from the pages of a comic book. I loved that sequence so much.
Oh yeah, it looks stunning as well. There's the moment where he like lands and he looks up and there's a grave, and at first like it's not as obvious. It's not like Iron Man. It says like Anthony Edward Stark, and you're like, oh my god. Like, this is so in depth.
And then just like the iron gauntlet wrenches out, and then there's a zombie Iron Man and everything like that. It's
Oh my god, it's great. Nathan, Into the Spider-Verse are both of my decisive favorite Spider-Man movie. Yours, sort of. Did you confirm?
It shares the trophy.
Okay, nice. Look, this movie, we've been speaking about Peter Parker, so this movie is a little bit different. If you haven't seen this one, because it's kind of the one that it doesn't fall into the category of like one of the main three Spider-Mans, and that's because it's animated, and was kind of more of a kids movie when it came out. I don't know if you remember me saying this. We watched the preview for it. It was the graveyard sequence where he pulls Peter along through like the streets of New York. We had a preview for that in a movie that we watched together. And I don't know if you remember this. Is it Venom? Bloody hell. I don't know if you remember me saying this. I turned around to you and went, "This looks like garbage."
Did you? I don't remember that.
I genuinely, I don't know if I used those exact words, but I was not a fan. I remember saying like the animation was jarring. I didn't like it.
What a fool you are.
And I thought it was... Yeah, what a fool I was, Nathan. Because I didn't realize that this movie would have as much heart as it does. This movie is the first, I believe, to center around Miles Morales, or at least like the biggest Spider-Man platform that Miles Morales has been given.
It's definitely the first movie. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's... Look, there's not much else that can be said. Like, I virtually have no flaws to this movie. Like, I adore it. It tackles... Well, not only does it introduce a new Spider-Man, it introduces, like, fucking 6. And then it tackles the Spider-Verse, one of the most complex stories to tell. It does a Wilson Fisk character that is on par with the Daredevil Wilson Fisk, in terms of just how cool he is. Look, I feel like you're gonna have to jump in because I love this movie. I can't pinpoint a single thing.
I absolutely love this movie, and I think for me it comes down to one simple fact, and that's that it's a comic book. Right from the opening, it is a comic book through and through. The very first thing you see when the movie starts up is a approved by the Comics Code Authority stamp, just right at the front of it. It's filmed, like, I guess that's a weird term for an animated movie, but it's filmed like a comic book in terms of like the frame rate is slightly lower than it should be, and I do think that definitely works for it. Things are out of focus and blurred in the background. There's like thwip and like snap dialogue effects and everything like that. It's just 100% a comic book come to life, and not just in terms of like style, in terms of story as well. And for me, there's no higher praise than that, really. That's something that massively works in favor for this movie.
Yeah, it looks visually, like when I said I didn't like the animation style, I have done a very hard U-turn on that. I don't know if like they touched it up a little bit from the preview I saw, or I just got used to it when I saw it in the context of a whole movie. I love the style of this movie. Like visually, it's so impressive. The fact that you can just kind of you can pause this movie at any time and you've got yourself a lovely desktop background. Like it's breathtaking to look at. But also, for an animated movie, especially when aimed at kids, it's got some heavy content. Like,
it really does, yeah.
There's a Spider-Man in this that just gets like literally pounded to death.
Kingpin just punches him in the face, and
he dies.
Yeah, Spider-Man as well. That one played by Chris Pine, who actually does really well.
He does very well. Really like. And it was that was a secret as well, because in the trailers his dialogue was given to Jake Johnson, which actually one thing I do love. Whilst I am going to talk about Miles Morales predominantly because he is the centric Spider-Man of this movie, Jake Johnson fucking kills it as Peter B. Parker. Jake Johnson, if I didn't know, is one of the leads in the sitcom New Girl. And after watching just one scene of that, you can see why they cast him. Like he's perfect for the role of like a kind of out of touch old man Spider-Man who's kind of a has-been and is well past it now.
I love the Spider-Man we're initially introduced to, the Chris Pine Spider-Man. He's just like the perfect one there is. Like he's likable, he's in shape, he's doing a great job as Spider-Man. People like and respect him. He's saving the city, he's doing a great job, he's blonde and handsome and everything like that. And then the Peter we spend most of the movie with, the Peter B. Parker, is just such the opposite. He's just someone who's been doing it a lot longer, and he's like sort of jaded by Spider-Man. He's just tired and bored of it, and he's not even in shape anymore because his relationship's going down the drain and everything like that. He's just such
they do like perfect exposition dumps.
I love the exposition dumps so much. Just the way the comic drops, let's do this one more time. And then they just tell you who the Spider-Man is. And I think, for me, the best scene or sequence in the movie is the leap of faith sequence towards the end. But that is great with the music and everything, and just the absolute visuals of Miles just not falling but rising, the way they flipped the image. But just after all of that, after that sequence, and he's swung through the city, and he jumps over the building that he couldn't jump over earlier, and then he pulls off the mask. Just the way then it takes a moment, and then his comic drops onto the pile as well. I love that so much. That's so fucking good.
Oh, it's a brilliant inclusion. To be fair, up until the other day when I rewatched this, I would say the leap of faith was my favorite sequence, and look, it still is a very, very close tie. There's a really underrated moment that I've watched this movie 3 times, one in cinema and twice out, and one of them was the recent time. And it took me until this third time to kind of realize the weight that a particular line has. And it's said later on, basically, earlier on in the movie, Miles has a very throwaway line to Peter B. Parker, and he says, "How do I know I won't mess it up again?" Yeah. And then Peter says it's a leap of faith. And then there's the moment where at the end, Miles is really coming to his own. It's after the leap of faith. He's arrived at the big machine to help everyone. And Peter B. Parker is essentially about to stay there and sacrifice himself. Because he'd rather do that than just go back to his world where Mary Jane's left him, Aunt May's dead. And it's just a little bit depressing for him there. And Miles trips him up using the same maneuver that Peter taught him, catches him before he goes, and Peter immediately realizes that Miles is ready. But before he goes, Peter repeats back to Miles something that Miles had asked him earlier and says, "How do I know I won't mess it all up again?" And Miles says it's a leap of faith, and then Peter realizes himself and lets him go. And it's just such I love that moment because it's although the movie spends a great deal of time telling us that this version of Peter Parker hasn't got it all together, you still see him as you still know that that's Spider-Man.
Oh yeah,
you still know that's Peter
he's
Parker.
He's still competent, and he still knows what he's doing.
Yeah, and then it gets to that moment, and you realize this whole time, this guy has needed Miles just as much as Miles has needed
Massively.
him. And it's brilliant. I don't know. I genuinely, that moment choked me up because I was like, fucking hell.
What moment really choked me up? And there's quite a lot of them because it's a kid's movie, yeah, but it's really emotional and has a lot of heart to it, I think. And this one's more of a personal one, and I imagine it would be that way for a lot of people, though. This was the first Marvel movie to come out after Stan Lee died. So the Stan Lee cameo where he says anyone can put on the mask, that one, oh, that got to me, man. I was crying in the cinema. And then they make a joke of it because there's no refunds or anything like that. He says it always fits, and that's the joke, because there's no refunds. But it's still,
it tricks you, doesn't it? Because it says he says, "Oh, Miles says, can I take it back if it doesn't fit?" And he goes, "It always fits eventually." Yeah. And you go, "Oh, that's such a lovely sentiment." And it turns, and it's just no refunds ever. It's a brilliant moment, and it does, obviously. I think it was maybe intentionally designed like that to give you that levity.
I feel like
it does very much.
I feel like that may have been touched up after Stanley's death. I don't know that for sure.
I completely think it was,
just to add a little bit more weight to it or something like that. Because it definitely is like quite a touching moment. And then just broken by a joke, which still works for it. What did you think of Gwen Stacy?
I loved her in this. There's a point that I heard made somewhere else, so I won't claim that I had this thought myself. The Spider-Gwen style, like the costume style, lends so well to animated movies. It just looks so visually impressive. But yeah, no, I really liked her. I liked. At first, I thought they were going for a kind of a romantic thing between Gwen and Miles, it sort of a little bit was. They're kind of like flirty with each other.
There's definitely hints of that. Yeah, there's flirting moments, and they're definitely characters who have an attraction towards each other. I think that's evident.
But then the thing I really enjoyed about this was that it's a you can so tell that the movie prioritizes character over movie tropes. Like the obvious thing would have been for them two characters to get together at the end, and then Miles is Spider-Man. Miles is the only Spider-Man in that universe, and then he has Gwen, albeit in a different reality, but that kind of thing. But no, the movie takes seriously the trauma that Gwen faced, because although obviously Peter is her friend in that universe when he dies, we know the two characters for having a romantic connection to each other, and half of Gwen's character is rooted in the fact that she won't really open up to other people. So why on earth would she suddenly just fall in love with this random guy from a different universe? So I like that, but yeah, there definitely was hints of the romance there, but I'm glad they left it open-ended. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I'm glad that the movie let Miles be like Miles and get Miles straight before he worked on anything else.
Absolutely. Do you reckon that Peter B. Parker knows who Gwen Stacy is? Do you reckon that version of him has had a relationship with his own version of Gwen in the past?
I don't know. It's an interesting point. I thought about that in reverse, because surely Gwen would recognize this older version of Peter. But yeah, no, I'm not sure. Maybe, but he doesn't really have much time for her. Like, it's not that he dislikes her.
You're right. Like he doesn't mention or hint to anything that at all. That's just my own thought, because obviously Peter, traditionally in the comics anyway, before Gwen Stacy is his first girlfriend before Mary Jane, then sadly she dies, and he moves on and gets with MJ. A lot less coldly than I just put it, though.
Yeah, she gets over it. Fuck her. She's dead now.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, like, that because if that is the case, then that would have been really weird for him, just seeing his old dead girlfriend, who's now a 15-year-old girl, and a Spider Woman as well, or Ghost Spider as she's called. That would have been wild.
Yeah, it would have. I can imagine it probably would have rocked him a little bit. But then I don't think, just thinking about what the facts the movie presents us with, I don't think that this version of Peter B. Parker did have that experience with Gwen, because we see how rocked he is when he just encounters MJ in the alternate universe,
and Aunt May as well.
And Aunt May, he's very. Yeah, because both of MJ he's not with anymore, and his version of Aunt May is long dead. So, I feel like we would have had a more shocked reaction from Peter if he was to have had that experience. But it's an interesting point. I suppose the multiverse does open all those questions, doesn't it?
I don't know if you know this because I know you're not really someone who's read the comics or anything like that. But traditionally, in Miles's story, it's his father who dies. It's Jefferson
yeah, no, I
Davis, the
knew
cop.
that, yeah.
And right, okay, but in this, it's his uncle, Aaron, the Prowler, who's a great villain, by the way. Like,
Oh, yeah.
the music design on him, like that sort of like sting that they do is just incredible. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's terrifying
Fucking
as
is,
well.
man. It really is.
Yeah. But what did you think of that? Like, they flipped it essentially so that his dad's still alive, but his uncle died. What did you think of that?
So like you say, I'm not really familiar with Miles Morales as a comic book character at all. And I know the most of what I know about Miles's story and his origin is rooted in the Spider-Man game that came out on PS4.
Yeah.
Because that tells it quite well. So I knew that it was his dad that died, and I have to admit, when at the beginning when they were setting it up, the whole like the dad saying like say that you love me and kind of thing, and I thought he was going to die basically. I thought they were going to follow that, and then they don't, and it was quite. At first, I thought it was a bit of an odd choice to have his uncle as the Prowler. As in, like, obviously I know he always is, but, like, to have that in this story and then the uncle is the one that dies, I thought was interesting. Because it definitely, it serves way more of as a lesson to Miles, I think. I like the fact that his dad is the one that normally dies because it's the whole you can't save everyone kind of thing. But it does always feel a little bit reminiscent of like an Uncle Ben ripoff. The father figure dies, you can't save everyone. Now you've got to learn how to be a
that's
hero.
just... it's not so much Uncle Ben, it's just comics in general.
Yeah,
really,
like someone has to die for you to want to save everyone.
Almost every single superhero origin story is somehow revolving around a parent or parental figure dying.
That's true.
Just
That's very true.
Comics 101.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like you say, the Prowler was like a fucking great character. I really loved the connection between Uncle Aaron and Miles.
Same.
You could so tell that Miles, like, I love the fact that like when his dad was talking, he wasn't listening, and when like everything Uncle Aaron had to say, Miles was like soaking it in.
Yeah. Because he's
like
the cool, fun uncle and everything like that.
Yeah, you came to really, when the Prowler died, it really hit home for Miles. Like, this is why my dad didn't like you.
Yeah.
like although obviously Miles still had the love and utter respect for his uncle, he saw his dad's point of view so much more after that death.
And the scene, talk about like emotional moments, the scene where Jefferson goes to Miles's like dorm room just to like tell him that his uncle's dead, but he can't quite say it. And he still thinks that Miles is mad at him, and Miles at that point can't even respond because he's been webbed up.
Webbed up,
he's webbed up and he can't talk. So Jefferson just has to like basically just talk on his own because he thinks that Miles is still pissed with him. It's just such a heartbreaking moment because you can tell that Miles wants to say something. He wants to go out there and give his dad a hug if he can. But he just can't, really.
And he does have that lovely moment at the end where he, like, even as Spider-Man, he just, like, can't help himself and he does just hug his dad.
Yeah.
And it's lovely. No, like, I didn't mind that change at all. I felt it really benefited the movie. There's a lot of side Spider-Mans in this. So we got Spider-Man Noir,
Nick Cage,
you got Spider-Ham,
John Mulaney,
Nick Cage, and then John Mulaney.
Yeah.
And then you've got who's the other one?
Penny Parker.
Penny Parker.
Yeah.
What do you make of those guys? Because they're obviously less explored intentionally in the film's case.
Yeah, they're definitely more left to the side in terms of the story, and probably for the better. But I like those characters. Definitely. Well, I say that. But, I haven't even said it yet. But I was gonna say definitely wouldn't work in live action. But I think it possibly could in terms of like Spider-Ham and everything like that. Because that's something. Obviously, the animated nature of the film lends itself to. Like, you can have these wacky, literally cartoonish characters, and just run with it. Essentially, probably wouldn't work in live action, but in an animated film, it works. Yeah, it's a little over the top. It's a little in your face. It's a little kid friendly. But I like it, man. John Mulaney, probably one of my favorite comedians. So I love.
Yeah, it's brilliantly casted, this movie.
Oh, massively, yeah. And Nick Cage as Spider-Man Noir. That's just great as well.
That is perfect. Yeah.
What do you think of them?
No, like, what do I think of them?
Yeah. I'd imagine you'd have a
like
problem with Spider-Ham because you hate fun.
Oh, you know what? You like the Raimi movies once, and suddenly you can't ever have a legitimate opinion on it anymore. No, I didn't hate Spider-Ham.
Okay.
And fuck you. Okay, look, I have to be completely honest.
Yeah.
When I first saw this movie, I didn't like Spider-Man.
I knew you, because I know you, and I know you mostly hate fun and you love French noir cinema. So anything
It's not true.
that's light-hearted,
It's not true. I love fun.
No,
I'm a fun guy.
You can't have fun in cinema. It's a serious genre.
The medium of film is disrespected by flying ham pigs. No, look, I didn't like it at first. I thought it was a little bit. I'm proud of myself because I went out of my way to fix my issue with this. I wasn't really a fan. I thought it was a little bit annoying. And then I went, maybe I just don't get the humor.
Yeah.
So I decided, because I said I love every part of this Spider-Man movie, and I'd hate to say there was just one thing I didn't like about it, because I genuinely loved every part of it. Other than that. So I went and watched one of John Mulaney's stand-ups, and then when I watched it again, I really enjoyed it. So I went out of my way to fix my French noir cinema prejudice. And no, I really do enjoy it now. Yeah, but no, I liked all the side characters. I think they really worked. They served their purpose, like you said. I like the fact that they're kind of intentionally pushed to the side, but then they're not incapable of like normal moments. Like they all tell their stories, and like Nick Cage's Spider-Man Noir like has this like really lovely moment with Miles where he like puts his hands on his shoulder and he's like, "Look, you'll get there, just you're not there yet," kind of thing.
I think they all have like a really good like sort of goodbye moment. I think Spider-Ham's just makes me laugh. It just makes me crease every time. He goes, "That's all, folks," and then Miles goes, "Can you say that like legally?"
Oh yeah. No, that's good. I like when he pulls out a ginormous hammer from his back pocket, or like a mallet, and he like gives it to Miles.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a great movie.
Just the actual character of Spider-Ham in terms of like his actual comic book character is just completely bizarre as well.
Yeah,
because you see Spider-Ham, and then you would assume, okay, so a pig bitten by a spider. Obviously, it's the other way around. It's a spider bitten by a radioactive pig.
It just makes no fucking sense, right?
No, it makes no sense whatsoever. But it's great.
A spider bitten by a radioactive pig. Yeah, you'd think that you'd just keep them the same. Like at least have one through line being the radioactive spider.
No. And of course his name is Peter Porker as well. So he was a spider that was called Peter Porker, which is just
fuck's sake
incredible.
It's brilliant. But you could tell that was a character that was not thought out, and not like people wouldn't realize how popular that character became as like a joke.
It's great. Yeah,
it is great. It's so stupid. It's so dumb. Okay, well, look, I think we should wrap it up there. This has been very long.
Well, before we do wrap it up, just quickly, I say quickly, you never know with us. Spider-Man, the Marvel Cinematic Universe version is not finished yet. Well, obviously, because that's going to go on forever, most likely. But the trilogy is not finished. What would you want to see in Spider-Man 3 Home coming warrior or whatever it's going to be called.
Fuck's sake. Uncle Ben. No, I'm joking. I would like to see
Sam Raimi.
Yeah, I'd say Sam Raimi returning to direct extensive Uncle Ben flashbacks, and Tom
Holland recast to Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, exactly. Just re-release Spider-Man 3. I'm fine with that. No, I'm not like with this version. Like you said, it's so different to the other versions we've got. I don't know what I'd want from it that they wouldn't like. I'm very impressed with the villains that they've gone with so far. And I really like how they're portraying them and kind of making them a little bit different to their comic counterparts. So I trust them entirely to just bring something new and fresh. The one thing I'd ask if they're making a new one, which they obviously are, is that Spider-Man stands on his own 2 feet a little bit more. I'd love to see, now that Far From Home really liberated him from Tony Stark, which again, I had no problem with that relationship, but now that they've made the choice to say, Spider-Man is his own man, and he doesn't need to live in the shadow of Iron Man anymore. I'd love for us to really see him in his own element now. Like, I'd love for us to see the experienced Spider-Man rather than the Spider-Man that's always unsure of himself, which is what we've got in the last 2 movies. I'd like to see the Spider-Man that's a bit more confident, that can handle his shit, and then maybe he gets knocked back a little bit when he is a bit too overconfident. I suppose like little characteristics I'd like to see explored. I don't know to what capacity, but yeah. What about you? What would you like to see?
All of that's great. I'm kind of meant like in terms of the story now that everyone knows he's Spider-Man.
Oh, I see. I'm so embarrassed, Nathan. So you had about 2 minutes to interrupt me there at any point, just to let me know.
I don't want to interrupt you. That's bad form.
That is bad form. I'm sorry. Okay, look, I have no idea. This is uncharted territory.
Yeah.
And obviously the only time that Spider-Man has really made a big thing of revealing his identity in the comics is in the Civil War comic, and we're way past that in the MCU.
It's happened a couple of times.
Well, but that's the main one, right? Like the Civil War.
That's
one.
Yeah.
I have no idea. It's a different ballpark, really.
It is, yeah. I'd like it to be something that has serious ramifications. Quite a lot of criticism of the MCU, and something I agree with as well, is that a lot of times stuff is just brushed over and doesn't really hold any weight in the future. Like you could say with Aunt May finding out he's Spider-Man and everything like that. It's a good ending moment for a movie, but then it's just not really mentioned again. I don't think you can't just drop something like that and just completely at the start of the next movie say, yep, that's all wrapped up.
You could if you hadn't made it such a big deal in the other movies.
Yeah.
So do you know what? Actually, saying that, now that I've kind of been reminded that that's how Far From Home ends, I would really enjoy seeing, you know, in the post credits, of like Michael Mando's Scorpion, and he's like, "Yo, fucking Vulture, who is Spider-Man? Like, tell us."
Yeah,
and he's like, "No clue," and like Vulture like protects him.
Yeah,
I'd love to see, now that common villains have that knowledge, I'd love to see like his friends and family really threatened, and Peter in a position where he has to basically just fucking dial in on the fact that he is Spider-Man. His actions have had consequences, and sadly he couldn't foresee this, and now he's got to be the person that looks after his family and his friends. And I'd love to see that. I'd love to see some.
I would like to see that as well.
Yeah, I'd love to see some kind of wide acceptance from like the Flash, who obviously, because he'd probably very conflicted, given that he basically loves Spider-Man.
Did you just say the Flash?
Not the Flash. You know what I mean, Flash.
But did you just say that though?
I won't confirm that for your benefit, so you can laugh at me.
Like I said, I want this to be something that has ramifications. Usually, in terms of Spider-Man, I wouldn't really want his identity out there. I think it's better when he has that secret that he needs to protect and he has to struggle with that. but I kind of want them to commit to this. Like, I don't want them to fix it. I don't want them to come up with a way and prove that Peter's not Spider-Man or something, which I'm sure they can do, and I'm sure they can do it in a way that works. But I want this to be something that has serious ramifications for him.
It'd be interesting to see like a load of press teams from like the Avengers facility. Like, you can deny this, you can say this, you can say that this isn't right, and I'd love to see him like.
Not even that. Like, I want him to like be on the run, like, essentially, because like J. Jonah Jameson, again, great J.K. Simmons, has like basically outed him as a murderer of Mysterio, which people still think is like a great superhero. They don't know he was the villain. So, and he, as far as everyone is concerned, he murdered him and then caused the attack on London as well. So he can't just like go back to school. He can't just live a normal life after that. People are gonna want to get him, essentially.
It's true. No, it's true. And it would be very interesting to see that kind of, like I said, it hit him at home kind of thing, like both, you know, like metaphorically and literally, like for Aunt May to be in the firing line would really shake up the dynamic, would really make Peter, you know, despite the fact that obviously he's faced like enormous threats at this point as Spider-Man in the MCU, but would like, you know, would really fuck him up. Like, I'd love to, like you say, I don't want them to just have a big swing, and the last thing I'd want is for like a repeat of the ending of Homecoming, where, like you say, it just wasn't mentioned again. I'd love to see this actually pretty much be the main driving force of the plot in the next one.
And I think it will be, because I think it has to be. Like I say, with a bombshell that big, it's not really something that you can just gloss over. So hopefully it is. And then another thing, at the moment, there's a lot of talk of a sort of a live action Spider-Verse, getting Andrew back, getting Toby back. What do you think about that?
I would love the idea of it. I think it all comes down to right directors, because there's, you know, it's a risky live action movie to make. You've got the issue of like completely different tones, but in, you know, at its core value, at concept, I think I'd love to see it. I would very much so enjoy seeing their Spider-Mans interact with each other.
I think I would disagree that it's a risky move. I think that's guaranteed to make $1 billion.
Oh, financially, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's whether people come out of it going, fuck, that was a pile of shit or not. No, financially, I think a live action Spider-Verse would fucking kill the game. I think it'd be amazing. It would be easy billion, easy, if not maybe looking at like 1.5 billion. Just because of how many like demographics that's going to touch.
I think that at this point where we are now, I think that it's almost an absolute certainty that it's going to happen.
Do you think so? What makes you say that?
No, yeah. I think because there's so much conversation about it, and positive conversation, right, about it, about that's what people want to see as well. People are really nostalgic for the Raimi films at the moment. Raimi's coming back to do Doctor Strange as well. And then in terms of the overall, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the overall state of the industry, that's kind of where everything is leading to as well. Like if you look at what DC just did with Crisis on Infinite Earths, like bringing pretty much everything all together into one, like every single DC TV show there has ever been and movie, essentially, but bringing them all together in this huge crossover. And then as well, the Flash movie with Michael Keaton coming back as Batman and reprising that role. I think because of everything like that, and just the ongoing conversation around it, I would say after Spider-Man 3, after we've had some time to finish up Peter's story, or this part of it anyway, then that is when the multiverse will open and we'll start to see it.
I would like to see it. I don't know. Do you reckon, because Andrew Garfield and Sony did not part ways on the best of terms, do you reckon that would be an issue?
All they have to do is just throw a fucking couple of million at him, all right? It's just a matter of a paycheck. They'll absolutely do it. They'll find a way.
Do you reckon? Because he's not overly...
If you can get Harrison Ford back to do Star Wars, you can do anything.
Yeah, that's fair. That is very true. That is very true.
And twice as well. Twice.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. That is fair enough. No, I'd like to see it. And like you make good points. Like, hopefully it is coming our way, because it's something the fans have been after for years. And yeah, all right, we did get the multiverse through Into the Spider-Verse, but studios know that we want to see Toby, Andrew, and Tom together.
And I think we'll see them in Spider-Verse as well, like the animated one. I think they'll have voice cameos.
I do as well.
But I think it is only a matter of time until we have the Spider-Men.
Yeah, well, they've got no issue casting big names. Like they didn't they cast Oscar Isaac for literally like an end of credits cameo.
Yeah, he was Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099. Yeah.
So they've got. Yeah, I feel they'll do it. Like Spider-Man is Sony's hottest property. They're going to milk that cash cow fucking for everything it's worth.
Massively.
We all know that Sony love to do that. It's just getting the creative people on board to make it good. I'd hate to see it.
That's the thing, though. But with the way it's working now, though, it's not so much Sony in creative control. That may be what they say, but you and I and most people both know that it's actually Disney running things instead of Sony.
Oh, thank fuck for that. Jesus. How many happy pods was this for you?
There's so many to give out. I can't.
All right,
I can't do them all.
We're going to quick fire it. Raimi trilogy.
All right.
Too slow.
A decent pod.
A decent pod. Okay. Amazing Spider-Man.
A underrated pod.
Okay. MCU.
I struggle with adjectives for these fucking shitty rating system you forced on me.
Hey, don't hate the rating system. It's good and it worked.
A jubilant, ecstatic, all-round good time pod.
All right, lovely. Quickly, do me.
Raimi.
Oh, French noir, beautiful, c'est magnifique.
Amazing.
Yeah, underrated. You summed it up perfectly.
MCU.
Fine. Great, but room for improvement. What do you say, Into the Spider-Verse?
Yeah.
The best. Easily.
Fair enough. I feel like you changed the rating system there slightly, but all right.
I did. You are right. I wasn't fully there.
Yeah.
Let's do it all again. Let's start from the top.
Let's not. All right. We probably should have mentioned this up top, but we got some more stuff coming in terms of different content. We'll get into that a little bit later at the future at some point. But watch this space or another space or your own space. Who knows? I'm tired, so I'm going to bed. Bye.
Definitely watch your own space. You don't want to be intruding in other people's space.
Bye.
If you're an astronaut, it's important for you to watch.
Bye.